The opportunity of preaching for 2 Sundays while Kim's recovering. You know, Kim, they say if you're a good preacher, you deserve 2 weeks of vacation. But if you're not, the church deserves 2 weeks of vacation. So I'll let you decide that question, all right? But I'm proud to have Kim as my pastor. He's the only pastor I've ever had, other than when I was a teenager. And that's one of the reasons why my wife and I came back. For those of you who weren't here last Sunday, don't know who I am, let's leave it that way. No. But I was a youth minister at Milford for 3.5 years when 13 people came up to Goshen and began a church at Goshen. And I stayed here as the first minister for 16 years. Then the church got rid of me by sending me to Elkhart East. We began a new church in Elkhart. And I was there 10 years, and then I went to Holland, Michigan for 10 years. And so now I'm retired, I'm back, and I feel very loyal to this church. That's why my wife and I placed our membership the first Sunday. We were going to shop around. Well, that's what I told her, but it was a big surprise. But we're glad to be a part of this church. And I appreciate the opportunity to preach. And Kim and Janet are both two of the reasons we wanted to be here. I love a parade. I was going to sing it for you, but my voice is froggy today, all right? Of all days when I preach, I love a parade. You know, but it all began in the Hessville Church, Hessville, Indiana. And I've got pictures of me. I didn't bring any. I know you're happy, but I didn't bring any. Of me holding my ears. Well, I wasn't holding them, but I had my hands over my ears, I guess, on the curb during a parade. Oh, the sirens. As a kid, I was scared to death, of course. You know how it is. And then I had pictures of me as a teenager in the Morton High School marching band. By the way, I played a baritone. And when I graduated from high school, I know some of you don't think that happened, but I did. And to be frank with you, I've never touched one since. So, that's interesting. But you know what it's like, the Elkhart County Fair. I was with it for 16 years as part of the Kiwanis Club in the judging department. I used to sit up in the gazebo at the fairgrounds, and we would judge, and I would help pass out awards and things. The Elkhart County Fair has a grand marshal, as you know. Usually it's a local dignitary or a farm family or volunteers or some kind of heroes in the community, and they make them the grand marshal of the parade. You get to ride in a fancy car, be up front. I've just moved from Holland, Michigan, and we know parades up there. Tulip time, May 1st, the first week of May. In the 10 years since Holland has 3 parades during that week, I have never missed one. I've been to 30-some parades. They have a street sweeping parade where everybody dresses in a Dutch costume and they sweep and they have buckets and they wash, because dignitaries are coming, so they get the streets cleaned. Then they have a kinder parade with probably 6,000 to 7,000 children all costumed up in Dutch. In fact, my grandkids came up a couple years and we dressed them up. They were young enough not to be embarrassed, so it was great. And then on Saturdays, always the music parade where everybody, snow, rain, sleet, 80s, through those 10 years, that's what it's been. And they have grand marshals of their parade, like the governor and the mayors and dignitaries from Holland and volunteers, college presidents, I'm trying to think of all. But then we have the Macy's parade. Do you know who the grand marshal of the Macy's parade is? He doesn't lead the parade, he ends the parade. Santa. Every year the same guy, I'm telling you. There's no creativity there, all right? But the granddaddy of them all, you know which one that is? That's the Rose Parade on January 1st. Here's some of the grand marshals. I just looked it up. Impressive list. The Disney family have been the grand marshals of the Rose Parade. Walt, Roy, and Mickey. Buzz Aldrin, John Glenn, Shirley Temple, Jackie Robinson, Roy Rogers, Dale Evans, and I'm not sure, but I think they had Trigger mounted on a foot one of those years, all right? President Ford has been a Grand Marshal. Kermit the Frog has been a Grand Marshal. Frank Sinatra, Richard Nixon, Billy Graham, Bob Hope, John Wayne. That's just a few of my favorite. He's wonderful, wonderful. Mr. Lawrence as well, all right? So he was there. But in a similar fashion, there was a parade recorded in Scripture. In fact, I think that would be a great sermon series, which I'll never get to preach probably, but the parades in the Bible, did you know there are some? It'd be very interesting. And in this one this morning, Jesus is the Grand Marshal. He's the focal point. It is the triumphal entry into the city of Jerusalem. And my prayer is that you'll just not just cheer for him from the curb as he passes you by, but that you'll choose to follow him for all eternity. That's the purpose of the parade. So I want to look at 4 things, and maybe 3 if I don't hurry. His claim, his courage, his criticism, and our choice. Well, let's look at the claim. Now, Luke 19, you can just open that, have that open on your lap if you've got one of those handheld calculator, IBM computer banks things. I don't know what it is. But let's look at the claim. Luke 19, and we'll read that here and there. It just talks about Jesus. We've already mentioned it. In the triumphal entry, we have a dramatic claiming that Jesus is the Messiah. When important people come to town, I'm going to get to the text, okay? So, I don't mean to embarrass you, but all right. I just wanted the Bible's open there, all right? When important people come to town, you see his airplane, Trump, circle the airport and gets everybody all frenzied up for some reason, all right? There's a police escort. There's Air Force One. There's a limo. In Holland, a few years ago, President Obama came. We had a battery plant, Korean, and they were going to change the automotive industry, and he came to brag about the turnaround for our country. The only thing is, a year and a half later, there was nothing produced in that billion-dollar factory. It was sitting with a skeleton crew, and he caught a lot of heat from it. But when he did come to town to dedicate it, it was very interesting, because I was watching the coverage on my TV, and they said, and the president is about to leave the battery factory. Well, he flew right over my house and went out on my deck, and there's 3 military helicopters, right over. And I thought, man, this would be so easy if I had a missile or something, or anything. No, you're misunderstanding. I just saw the safety factor of that flying so low right over the whole subdivision, and I saw him. He was following the highway to Grand Rapids, just down the road, And I thought that was so weird. He flew right over my house. But then, as I thought that thought that you all laughed about, I could see on the bridges, the overpasses down the highway there was military presence, and no one was on the bridges. And so it was very interesting. And then I thought he probably took the limo anyway, just as a diversion. The other 3 helicopters, and you wouldn't know which one it was. But they were taking him to Grand Rapids so he could fly out. But the Jewish people knew when the all-important Messiah came that he would ride into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. Do we have this passage in Zechariah 9:9? We don't.
I didn't
Okay.
put the scripture out, no.
Pardon?
I didn't write the scripture out.
Okay. The prophecy here is that he would come riding a colt into the city. The Messiah would do that. And so he was fulfilling prophecy. And Jesus had prearranged to do exactly that. And when he did, the people knew what was happening. It was like General MacArthur when he said, I will return to the Philippines. And he did. It was a photo op time. So Jesus, his claim was that he first of all fulfilled prophecy. In other words, as he rode into Jerusalem on the colt, he hung out a shingle saying, I'm open for business, flashing the neon sign for everybody to see, I am the Messiah, I am the Messiah. Everybody knew what that meant. Everybody was expecting it. And people exploded with excitement. They cut down the palm branches, they laid on the path, they put their coats or cloaks down on the street for the donkey. And I think if you read all the passages about the triumphal entry, I think the colt and the mother might have been taken. But that's for the commentators to decide. And they shouted, Hosanna, which means save us now. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. We got all kinds of political slogans and people are shouting, especially like the March Madness. We're number one, And so you can catch some of this excitement. Slogans like Make America Great Again, or Trusted Ted, or Fighting for Us, Hillary. That's her slogan. We're number one in the athletics. There's thousands of people lining the streets, and in unison they're shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna. It's electric atmosphere. There's 2.5 estimated million people. That's a big parade. I think Elkhart County gets about 250,000, but 2.5 million is quite a sight. And Jesus had already fulfilled so many prophecies: the virgin birth, the place of birth, his lineage, the wise men, the star, the miracles, John the Baptist, Mary, Joseph, Elizabeth, Simeon, and Anna in the temple. at his purification at 8 days, and then at the temple when he was 12. All these things were predicted, and he is now coming forward and claiming who he really is. And in the frenzy of this parade, Jesus says statements like this: before Abraham was, I am. Now that's very interesting to hear that statement. We even sang it in the song this morning. In other words, Jesus took on the name of God. No one was misunderstood about the claims of Jesus, who he was. It was so obvious. In fact, he took on the name of God. You remember Moses, when he needed to approach Pharaoh, he said, well now, who should I tell Pharaoh I'm speaking on behalf of, And God said, tell him the I am has sent you. Who? God's name was I am. And Jesus takes that name for himself when he says, before Abraham was, I am. In other words, Jesus was claiming eternity because he was before Abraham, and everyone said, well, he's dead, he's gone, how can you be before him? And Jesus said, I was before him because I am, and he left it right there, I am the deity. Not only did he talk about eternity in time and space, claiming he has always existed, but he claimed deity too. He says, but I am God himself. That's what he was saying. And he didn't just say it. He said, I made the blind to see with my spit. I raised the dead with my voice. I healed the sick with my touch. I and the Father are one. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He made those claims all through his ministry. And it was all coming to a climax as he enters into the city of Jerusalem. He said things like, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way and the truth and the life. And no one comes to the Father but through me. Can you imagine the claims? He's either a lunatic or he's God in the flesh. Jesus came to Peter and he asked Peter, who do people say that I am? Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And what's amazing about that statement was that there was no response. Like, oh, you're exaggerating, Peter. Lay low. Don't say that. He'll think I'm God. He accepted that claim. My Lord and my God, you see. He was the living God. There was no rebuke or denial from Jesus. And after the resurrection, Thomas touched the wounds of Jesus. And do you know what he said? My Lord and my God. And Jesus said, oh, don't say anything like that. He accepted that worship and praise. His claims come to you this morning as he rides into Jerusalem. And as he rides past you, will you just decide to cheer for him, merely tip your hat, a little applause for Jesus on the road? Or will you choose for eternity? It all depends if you believe his claim or not. There's a second step here, and that is the courage. Now, we need to read our text. Some of it here. Let's turn to Luke 19. Is that on the screen? Pardon?
Hang quiet.
Okay. That's all right. That's why I've got it. Luke 19, verse 28, 29, and 30. But you know how age goes, all right? After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going to Jerusalem. As he approached Bethphage and Bethany at the hill called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples, and he said to them, go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you'll find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you untying it? You tell them the Lord needs it. And we'll just end right there with that. And I think most of us know this story, but to come into Jerusalem in the triumphal entry in this way at least, I'm impressed with the courage of Jesus. Have you ever thought about that? He knew his death was close. Many leaders were plotting his death, and they were plotting Lazarus' death also. In Matthew, it says that the disciples said, well, if you're going to Jerusalem, we might as well go with you because we're going to die together. We'll just do it together. And Matthew 20 talks about that. But in Luke 9:51, Jesus, it says, resolutely set his eyes, his face toward the city of Jerusalem. What courage, knowing what would happen. You think you've got a bad day when you know what's going to happen when you go into the dentist. So you say, well, there's no turning back now. I got to go. I set the appointment. And you go, well, think of this. Here's the death of Jesus. He knew what this was going to do. I have a little section in your outline about riding into the spotlight. Let's look at that just real quickly this morning, all right? There's a number of things that happened as Jesus rode and the spotlight hit him. First of all, bringing this all to a climax on the parade route was just a few days before he had performed a spectacular miracle. Does anybody know what that miracle might be? It was the raising of Lazarus from the dead. It wasn't done hidden in a corner. This miracle, this parade, occurred on the heels of the most spectacular miracle in that little suburb of Bethany. Jesus had just raised Lazarus from the dead, and he waited to go to the city, and we don't know why. Mary and Martha, they were pretty upset. If you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died, they said. You could have helped. You should have been here. But for some reason, he delayed. I think we all know the reasons, so that God would be glorified, it says. But now he was dead 4 days, and he was in the tomb, and the stench of his body was evident. Isn't that great how the Bible gives such detail? Man, his body decomposed already, starting to. No one could raise the dead unless that person was God. And so Jesus was the talk of the town. And people were wondering, could this be the long-awaited Messiah and the frenzy was building? As Jesus started his trip up to Jerusalem, people from Bethany flocked around him. Those traveling to the city joined in. The pilgrims already there, and they were there for the Passover. They joined the hysteria and the growing crowd. He also arranged a parade, and that's what our text in Luke 19 is all about. He rode into this dangerous and electric atmosphere on the back of a donkey. The third thing he did was he fulfilled prophecy. And in Luke 19, verse 31 through 34, you can read about some of the prophecy that he has fulfilled. And I've already listed a few things. And number 4 is that he accepted praise. When Jesus was worshipped, Hosanna, Hosanna. He didn't tell the crowd, now settle down. Keep it to yourself. He even said, if you don't praise me, the rocks will cry out. Don't tell anyone. He didn't say that kind of stuff. You're all misguided. His time had come, and he accepted the praise of men. And Jesus didn't disguise himself when he came into the city under the cover of darkness, or he didn't walk the back streets. He didn't hide in a cave or a hole in the ground. You remember Saddam Hussein way back when? They found him in a hole. He came as the focal point of a parade. The spotlight was on him. And he was defying his enemies to do the worst work that they could. And when he was arrested, he even said to those arresting him, I didn't do this in a corner, but for all to see. I'm the Grand Marshal of this parade. But I think that Jesus still demands to be the focal point of your life. He needs to be the spotlight, the main event, the center stage in the life of every Christian today. Too often we're such cowards at demonstrating our faith. We're so worried about what other people will think, our image, what the peers at school might do or think, or our friends or our co-workers. But Jesus, he was so courageous. Lord, why can't I be that courageous? Why can't I speak out? Why can't I scream, Hosanna, tomorrow morning at the morning coffee break? Hosanna! You'll wake them up. And you'll be booted out. Why is it we're such cowards? We just hope they'll see Jesus in us. Why not tell them he's in you? But Jesus was so courageous. They hated him, and you know what? They still hate Jesus today. But here he comes as the Grand Marshal of the parade, throwing the gauntlet down for you and for me. It took such great courage. We should exemplify that same kind of courage. The third thing this morning is the criticism. Now in Luke 19, verse 39 and 40, some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. I tell you, Jesus said, if they keep quiet, the stones are going to cry out. Isn't that interesting? The triumphal entry came at a time when the opposition against Jesus was at its zenith. It says in John 11:57, the chief priests, the Pharisees, had given orders that if anyone found where Jesus was, they should report it so that he might be arrested. And not only Jesus, but it says, and Lazarus too. Well, why would they want to do it in Lazarus? You better kill Jesus first, because if you kill Lazarus first, Jesus will resurrect him again, and now it's a vicious cycle. He's never going to go. But they wanted to kill the testimony of Lazarus as to the claim of Jesus that this man healed me. I was dead 4 days. Every one of you know it. Wow. And so Jesus went into town like he was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Like we'd hang up a poster. You ever see the posters in the post office, the wanted posters? They're pretty ugly. You know, they're mean. They don't have any good pictures. You know, you talk about the driver's license. They're all bad at the post office. You ever see that? And that's what Jesus, he was wanted. He was a criminal in the eyes of the religious leaders, at least. I was asked, well, I wasn't asked, I was told one time that I was going to be in the Muscular Dystrophy Association, the MDA, roundup. I thought that would be great. I didn't know what it was. Well, they rounded me up, all right. They arrested me. I didn't know that's what was going on. And I thought, well, what did I do? You know, I said, well, what you got to do is we're going to put you in jail. You're going to call all your friends, and they're going to donate money to get you out. Guess what? I don't have that many good friends. So after I wrote a check for about $100, they were happy. You know, I started calling people, and they go, "You're in jail? Great." They don't care about me. Well, here's Jesus. The criticism is coming. He's the most wanted. And the reason they hated Jesus, and same today, the reason they wanted to be the focus of the parade instead of our Lord, was Jesus threatened their intellectual pride. Think about that. The Pharisees and the religious people, teachers of the law, the Sadducees, the priests, they had this problem. Jesus challenged their presuppositions in life. Jesus said, now, you've all heard it said, and then he'd sing the religious guys, don't commit adultery. But I say unto you, don't even look lustfully. He went up everything they were teaching. And they didn't like that. If you're a teacher and one of your students shows you up, not too good. I taught here at the middle school. I subbed in math. That's probably for Becky Hawkins. But math is not my strong suit. And luckily, there was a grade school kid that came over from one of the grade schools and was in the math class at the junior high. And I realized that, why'd they send you over? She says, because I'm good at math. I said, oh, thank you, God. You answered my prayer. And she taught more of the class than I did, all right? I looked at her, she goes, no. And then she said, yes, you know, that was good, all right? That kind of threatened my pride, no way. I was glad to have her. I was lost, you know. Jesus would say, you all said, do not murder, but I say, don't even get angry with your brother. The leaders of the day resented this itinerant, unschooled country bumpkin of a preacher trying to hone in on and instruct them. You can see it flew all over them. And so they said things like, by what authority do you say these things? To demonstrate their intellectual superiority and try to recapture the minds of the people, they tried to make Jesus look bad. And so they'd ask him questions. Now, Jesus, the woman caught in adultery, the law says you ought to stone her. What do you say? Another time they said, Jesus, what is the greatest commandment after all? Another time they said, by what authority do you do these things? Here's another one. Jesus, there was a woman, she had 5 husbands, and they all died. When she gets to heaven, whose will she be? Now, if I was Jesus and I was asked that, it's heaven, dudes. She's already trained 5. Why would she train 5 more? You know, that kind of thing. Anyway, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? And so all these questions. Jesus would always answer a question with a question. Don't you hate that? Think about it. They'd say, Jesus would say, the baptism of John, was it of man or of God? Huh? Okay. Whose inscription's on that coin? Jesus would ask. Huh? You know, and render unto Caesar, what's it, you know, that kind of. But there's so many questions today that people have. And you need the courage to confront the criticism that comes. Think about it. I'm asked today, you aren't that narrow-minded to believe in biblical absolutes, are you? Only one way to heaven? That seems so exclusive. Like you got it and no one else has it. Creation? There's no real scientific evidence for that. How are you answering? You saw how the Grand Marshal of Parade answers. Christianity is just a mental crutch for the weak thinkers. One man, one woman, one lifetime, it's not possible in our culture anymore. Give in order to receive? No way. It's a dog-eat-dog world, man. Be buried in water? Doesn't make sense. That's too simple. It's like Naaman in the Old Testament, an officer who was leprous and wanted to be healed, and he asked for the prophet, and of course he was too proud to take the prophet's advice, and so the servant came up and said, if the prophet had asked you something hard, you would have done it. He's asked you to go down to the river, get wet. Why don't you do it? Very interesting. That wasn't exactly how he said it. That was my modern interpretation, but you know what I mean. You see, the simplicity of the gospel of Jesus Christ is so simple that the intellectual is turned off by it. It can't be that simple. But it is. It's so simple that someone with an IQ of 0 can understand it. Yet it's so profound that a PhD can be lost in the grace of Jesus Christ. It's simple. It certainly is. And Jesus also threatened their pursuits. In our story in Luke 19, in verse 45 through 48, the next day, Jesus is found in the temple. You know this story, so we won't read it up on the screen. But the temple, he went in and he saw the money changers, exorbitant prices they're charging for these sacrificial animals. And they say, your animal's not good enough. Take it to the pen. You got to buy one of ours over here. It's clean. It's not blemished. And then the one you just gave away, they put it in the other pen when you left, and they keep this cycle of selling these animals, making a buck, making money. And so with one powerful swing, he overturned table after table. The researchers have said that the sound people hear over every other sound is, even in a crowded street with busy traffic, the drop of a coin will catch the attention of most pedestrians. Think about that, all right? If you've asked your kids a million times to get moving and they aren't moving, why don't you, and they're still glued to the TV, the cell phone, the computer, why don't you drop some coins maybe on the kitchen floor, and maybe they'll hear that, and they'll come and do what you want. That's a pipe dream, but you could try that. But he overturned the temple tables, he released the doves, the animals, with a whip cracking. Merchants took off, man. His eyes darting fire. Think about it. Jesus said, it's written. That's the last straw. And Jesus sealed his fate with that. You know why that was the last straw? Because when you get at the very heart of people and it's money, they can't tolerate very much. All the church wants is money. So there was the intellectual pride. There was the material pursuits. Jesus was a threat to both of those, but he was also a threat to their power. In John 12, it says, after the people heard about Lazarus, tens of thousands went out to meet Jesus. And the Pharisees said this is getting us nowhere. The whole world has gone after him. And the Pharisees liked their popularity. Their ratings were up. Have you noticed how no politician likes it when you siphon their votes off or the ratings are... And so revenue is down at the temple. Temple attendance is sagging. And so Jesus was a threat to their power. And let me have a warning right here for all of us. If our interests are focused on intellectual pride, material possessions, and personal power, we're going to be threatened by Jesus today too. Jesus said in our holy quest to be the Grand Marshal of our own parade, we're to humble ourselves. We're to give it away, not hoard it. To be the greatest becomes the servant of all. And if those statements are a threat to you as a Christian, then I think you're on the sidelines of this parade, just merely cheering and not choosing. So this confrontational atmosphere, this criticism of Jesus and his claims is all intensifying, I think, in our culture today. Jesus is the hinge pin of everything in our society. Have you noticed? It is the battleground. It is the difference.